how I have come to this point of talking about conflict of interest. Myself and Braja Bihari, we worked on the ODR proposal about ISKCON justice system for some time together, and I also don't know how Krishna has put me into this. Krishna put me into this situation where I was able to deal with these judicial areas of Krishna consciousness, you know. So this is I have so much experience in seminars and things like that. This is the first time I'm actually giving any talk like this, so please bear with me. I'm not experienced at this at all. So first of all, this was a committee was set up by the strategic planning team to deal with conflict of interest. And then it developed into a conflict of interest and ethics committee, because most organizations have rules about conflict of interest defined so the organization can act, or the members of the organization or the leaders of the organization can act in a correct manner. The Catholic Church, for instance, has extensive rules about ethics, and part of that is conflict of interest. Okay? The Congress of the United States has extensive, there was just recently a ruling about that. So, and other organizations, all universities have them. You may see some studies, medical studies, and at the end someone says, well, I am getting money from this drug company. So that's called disclosure. So he's actually avoiding a conflict of interest by mentioning these things. So we'll be getting into different types of conflict of interest so you can understand how to identify them, what it means. And then we're going to gravitate towards a proposal which is up with the GBC at this moment, and tomorrow they're going to take straw voting on this same proposal. So what we're going to work on that proposal, and you're going to make comments, and you're going to vote on it. And I'm going to present that to the GBC, your vote, also. So that's it's not you know, your participation will be heard even there. You know? Okay, so this is the definition that we're using now on the proposal. Conflict of interest will be broadly defined in ISKCON as the potential for any personal benefit, direct or indirect, that could be gained by dint of one's position as an ISKCON officer, authority, or member, that we added, the act of which places ISKCON's concerns second to one's own. Okay?
Can you hear in the back? Yeah.
Was that a yes or?
Yeah, that's a yes.
That's a yes.
Yes.
Okay.
That means no.
Okay. So everyone understands that point, you know, and it was explained by the basic principle by Braja Bihari Prabhu, what it actually means in a basic philosophical sense, you know. But if legislating it, you know, you have certain, that means there will be, if it's not followed, or there might be some
Consequences.
What? Consequences of, you know, not following that, you know. This is a Wikipedia definition which goes into motivation, and which was explained also by Braja Bihari. A conflict of interest occurs when an individual organization is involved in multiple interests, one of which could possibly corrupt the motivation for an act in the other. And this we can see in ISKCON also, when someone may have multiple positions and he has to maybe make a decision concerning one position, and he's the one who makes the decision. He may be a GBC, temple president, he may be in charge of the restaurant at the same time. So his decisions will be conflicting as far as his relationship with different positions that he might have. You know.
Well, especially if he's gaining some personal financial gain from
a benefit.
the restaurant.
Yeah, yeah. But there is a conflict of interest on the basis of decision making also, not only by personal gain. In that sense, you may have some conflict like that. This we eliminated. right? Okay. So first, in order to talk about conflict of interest, we have to talk about interests, okay? So, as everyone knows, the first thing everyone's interested in is the money, you know, the Lakshmi, you know, and the temple has a temple or institution has their financial needs, and if an individual does something to put into jeopardy those, you know, those financial needs, it causes a big problem in a temple. To give an example, let's say a big sannyasi preacher comes to your temple and he enlivens the devotees. So it's a wonderful relationship, but he goes to your biggest donor and he gets money for his project, and your donor says, well, I'm giving to him, I can't give to the temple anymore. So there's a definite conflict of interest. Now this type of conflict of interest is interesting because both of them have the interest of Krishna consciousness in mind. So it's an interesting, and Prabhupada had to deal with this sort of thing in Sankirtan. If you remember, there are certain cases with the Radha Damodar party where this party was big book distribution. They were taking men from the temples, so the temples were complaining, no, this is conflicting with the temple, and Prabhupada intervened and he stopped it. So even Prabhupada was conscious of that there might be some conflict of interest, you know. Institutional, as we talked about multiple positions, one may make decisions which are conflicting with certain positions he has. Now, it's not always that conflict of interest is bad. In other words, if it's disclosed and the authority accepts it as, you know, positive or not really detrimental, then it's okay. It's not really, it can be accepted. So it's not always that it's a bad thing, okay? One conflict of interest, for instance, I can give example in Chile. Is our Chilean man here? No. Okay. So, good. I may get it wrong. So the temple has a restaurant, you know, and part of their income is from the restaurant. So one devotee, he put right next to the temple, he put a restaurant which will compete with the temple, you know. So that's definitely a conflict of interest, you know. And as a member, he would have to, I mean, this legislation would help, will give the temple president, the temple authorities, a way to avoid that, okay? Now, let's give another example in the same situation. Let's change it a little bit. He doesn't put a restaurant there, but he puts something that has other things that the temple is not selling, for instance. Now that wouldn't be a conflict of interest. Or let's say he was selling a type of sweet that the temple wasn't selling, let's say. So although it might be a conflict, still, if it's arranged, then it wouldn't be a conflict of interest. Or it would be, but it's accepted. Okay? Another example would be, we had recently in Peru, whereby we have a health bar company. So we were looking for someone to take over the company, the management. So the only person that, you know, offered to take it over was one mother who had the same type of business. So normally that would be a conflict of interest, but we decided to, because it's a very specialized type of business, we decided to have her manage, and it was very positive for the company, for our company, because she knew all the details about that type of company, okay, and she was doing it as a save-up. So that was, although it would seem like a conflict of interest, it actually was very positive. So it's not as always that conflict of interest is not, you know, is negative. It could be acceptable in some ways, you know. Sometimes personal means nepotism. Wow, ooh, nepotism. Nepotism means that you, as Braja Bihari was explaining in the morning of his synopsis of this seminar, that your brother, what did you say? Your brother?
You're the temple president. You make your wife the vice president. Your son the treasurer. Your daughter-in-law the head Feburary.
Yeah. Or, I mean, there are some cases where, well, let's say let's take Mayapur. You know, you give your cousin or your father, someone, ability to take some land or sell some land or some land. You know, so that may be also. So it's involving family members. We extended that a little bit in our to God brothers, God sisters, and disciples. So we expanded it a little more because in our spiritual context, you also might have that, you know, that, well, someone just gives it to God brothers or like that. That sort of favoritism is also can be a conflict of interest. Now, okay, anything else? Doctrinal may be, for instance, Ritvigism might be considered a conflict of interest with our philosophy. So that's an example of a doctrinal thing that's...
In other words, you're saying, like, if you were a temple president and you're saying, okay, we're going to make this whole temple now follow the Ritvik philosophy, you're in a conflict with the ISKCON's interests. Right?
Exactly. Okay. Financial might also be food for life, conflicts with the food distribution at the temple, for instance. You may be a conflict there, you know, or someone making money for his personal interest when the temple could be, you know. There are certain things like that, but it's not, you know, always completely black and white, always. Okay. Here we go.
Let me see if.
Go ahead.
Let's see if we kind of got this, because it's not a completely simple concept to always grasp. So can you guys, gals, or whatever we are, prabhus, pravis, and everything in between, can you think of an example? Of course, you know, devoid of names and all that stuff, unless it's somebody we really want to criticize. Can you think of an example that maybe you've seen in your career? Yes, Prabhu.
In the United States, it was pretty prevailing.
A little louder.
In the United States, a lot of people wanted to come from India, wanted green cards. So some people who were in power there took money from them and processed their green card, and that's naturally against the immigration laws and all that. And there's somebody who's put in a jail recently for like 190 years or something. So basically, he's going to die.
Yeah, so you understand, right? So I'm the temple president, and I can use my signature to give letters for a visa, and so-and-so wants to come to America, and they'll pay me 5 lakhs, and so I use my position.
$30,000 they will show.
Yeah, it's big money.
Yeah.
Conflict of interest or just corruption?
Yeah.
No,
That's his job.
let me point out something that don't confuse embezzlement, fraud with conflict of interest. It may start out like that and then intensify to that other, but the other really bad thing is the one that prioritizes the what it actually is.
So is Prabhuji's one fraud or conflict of interest, or both, or neither? It's like a multiple choice.
I would go with fraud in that sense. I would go with fraud.
Okay, that's just fraud. Any conflicts of interest out there? Yes, Prabhu. Oh,
there's a temple in one town, and in another town is other devotees, non-Mahanta devotees. They start also worship of Radha Krishna, and now this temple suffers because devotees also go there, and also they make some
in the same town. Near. Okay.
And there's another temple with Radha Krishna deities, which are the official deities, and they also propose worship and some worship and programs, and so for me seems really a conflict from
That's a conflict. It's not
That's a
conflict of
conflict.
interest.
That's ISKCON Resolve. Come and see me after.
That's the other
But
conflict
actually
management.
what we're doing is we're learning here by what things
What the
are.
difference is, yeah.
So that's actually not really a conflict of interest. It is creating a conflict. And if you attend, I'll give a plug for another one of my seminars. If you attend the Unity and Diversity seminar, you'll see that actually the GBC has authorized that they want that to happen. They want many, many temples. And it's just that there should be cooperation between them. But that's a whole other topic we won't get into. Now let's see if we can find...
Well, how about if it's like the Sankirtan, you know, the places of Sankirtan?
Yeah, they have to work it out.
They have to work it out.
Is
that
Unity and Diversity?
Okay, that's university.
Yes.
Again, the names will be left out. There is a temple.
You can tell me afterwards.
ISKCON Resolve.
There's a temple.
Just speak
and
louder
the
so
temple
everyone can hear.
president happens to also be the landlord for the organization that pays him his rent, which he uses to pay the mortgage.
Excellent. That is a conflict.
That's a
of
conflict.
interest. Can you hear that in the back? No. He's saying
Explain it more
there's
carefully.
a temple president who is also the landlord. The temple rents the temple is on rent. They're paying rent. And the rent is paid to the landlord who happens to be the temple president. So if he raises the rent, for example, that is very good, Maharaj. That is definitely a conflict of
That means
interest.
he's charging Krishna to get his money.
Yeah. He's kind of like going, like this and putting it in here. Yeah.
But
He represents the congregation. He also represents his own financial.
Yeah, so he's representing the congregation, he's representing his own financial needs. Right?
okay, yes, but wait.
Disclosed, right?
Yeah. Let's say he goes to the zonal secretary, the GBC. He says, "This is the situation. I'm offering it for less than the market price for the devotees. It's a seva I'm doing, this and that, and it's accepted. That exception is accepted. Then it'll be all right." So in other words, it's not necessarily always bad. You know, I always get that in your head. It's not always bad, especially if it's disclosed. And this is we're going to get this ways to mitigate conflicts of interest.
Vasudeva, were you had a conflict of interest? I mean, not personally.
Yes, a guru is preaching and he's invited by a temple to give a series of lectures, so they all have the same interest to preach. But when he comes, many temple congregational members come to him and give him donations, and then off he goes, and this temple suffers from
Did you hear in the back? Yeah. Is that a conflict of interest?
That's what I was explaining. I gave that same example that that happens, and certainly the temple president would consider it a conflict of
You
interest.
consider it a conflict.
Well, it certainly conflicts with the interest of the temple, but the person who's doing it is not necessarily in violation because he doesn't have any position there. You know, so it's a gray area in that sense, unless he was the GBC. Also, you know.
But just to let you know how comprehensive our strategic plan is, that actual scenario, you'll hear when Bhadrinath Prabhu in the plenary session discusses a paper that's being voted on this year in the GBC, which is entitled, for lack of a better word, Parallel Lines of Authority. When you have, the authority system Prabhupada set up, GBC body, GBC's temple presidents, and then gurus kind of floating around. I mean, because they're so transcendental.
An ecstasy.
And disciples sometimes follow the guru more than the authority system Prabhupada set up. So that is actually being addressed there.
But we dealt with this. I mean, we dealt extensively with this same question in our committee. And because Parallel Lines was dealing with it, we didn't put it so we didn't get into it. Ramabhadra Prabhu was also in our committee. He's here. Thank you for attending.
That beautiful sky blue.
Sky blue Ramabhadra Prabhu.
Yes. Oh.
I don't know whether this is really a conflict of interest, but
Speak a little louder.
a situation where we had a stockbroker who was wanting to deal with the temple finances, to make an investment and so on, just because he's going to be getting a commission out of that particular investment that he was making. So he was a devotee, but the rationale behind him putting forward his candidature in order to make the investment was that he could be getting a commission out of that mutual fund investment. So
very good. That's a potential conflict of interest. Okay. Of course, if he discloses, what happened? If he discloses it, etc. But yes, very good example.
I want them to see this so they can keep on the focused on what it. Prabhu.
Same devotees run the same devotees who run the BBT also run the temple. So the BBT produces books, sells it to the temple. So in one position they decide the price for the sale, and the other position they decide the
right.
Could be yes.
Now in that case, which you have here, if BBT has their own evaluation of costs and prices. So in that case, this third-party evaluation comes in, where that you can mitigate that by the simple fact that that BBT is controlling what the prices are.
But is it a conflict of interest?
It is a conflict of interest, but it can be mitigated because BBT is controlling the prices, not him.
Yeah, but if these persons are both in charge of the prices from selling, production and selling, and then also they decide on the price of buying.
Well, it might be against BBT. They may sell for less money or something. I don't know.
Right, so the BBT may say it's a conflict.
Right, the BBT may say it's a conflict, but still the BBT is regulating their own prices, and that's third-party evaluations.
One other example.
Basu Ghosh Prabhu was also a member of our committee, so he's here also. I'd like to recognize that. He hates him. It's okay. It's okay.
One last one. Yes, Prabhu? Stand up, please.
Temple president intends to run the temple, but there is a group of congregation, they promote their own gurus, their own state ministry and yatras, and they use the temple to promote the guru.
That's parallel lines of her.
No, it's not.
Parallel.
Conflict of management. That would be.
Yeah, I don't think that's a conflict of interest, but it certainly is a conflict, for sure. Just send them ours. Then we'll take care of it.
But conflict of interest usually happens when one person has more than one position.
Well, that's one of the ways it could be, and these different positions conflict with each other. That's a type of. It's one way of that one type of conflict of interest. But
or you could just have one position, but you
control both.
But yeah, exactly. Right. It's like yes.
If you have GBC, but for some reason there is no temple president and there is nobody else in charge of the restaurant, therefore by default you would be in conflict of interest because you run all three.
Or let's give an example that's actually real, but I mean that the GBC is also the manager of the restaurant, and he's getting a salary from that, and and the restaurants are owned by the temple, the yatra. So he is the one who will delegate how much he gets. So that's definitely a conflict of interest.
And manpower also. I had a case once where the temple president also ran a prasadam distribution program. And there was, actually they worked it out with a lawyer, there was nice separation in terms of kind of the finances, but he was using the temple kitchen for the prasadam distribution.
For preparing the prasadam.
Preparing the prasadam. And there wasn't any arrangement for any kind of reimbursement for that part. And so there was a potential conflict of interest there using you see.
Is that potential or is that a conflict?
Well, if none of these things were addressed, then it would be a conflict of interest, yes.
Yeah.
And I'm sure running the ISKCON India, you run into these things, I'm sure sometimes. I mean, because any big...
Past.
Yeah.
But just one, if the person who is in conflict of interest, also the person who implements ways to mitigate the conflict of interest, he just can do whatever he wants. The way he does disclosure, his position, or or
You mean if you get other people involved in the
party that he wants to finance.
If he pays, yeah.
pays off the GBC and
So the combination of the...
You want to stand up?
The combination of the quote, parallel lines of authority paper that's been worked on for many years, and now this conflict of interest, I believe, / ethics behavior
Yeah.
document that will be produced will resolve all of these different phenomenal issues.
hopefully.
That affected us for many decades in the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, simply because we didn't have these kind of things in place. And when you don't have these kind of things in place, generally it becomes an open field for independent activity.
Right.
And therefore people will make little mistakes that if they see it as a law, oh, I can't do that now, because then it goes beyond conflict of interest and it becomes what? Abuse of power. And that's
Yeah.
another, in the real world, that's another reason for downfall or reprimand. But that's the good news, that this plus the parallel lines of authority, it will resolve this to a very, very large degree if it's done and as fast as possible and implemented nicely throughout the world.
Thank you, Baruch. So,
And if you don't implement it properly, we're going to send Ram Bhadra Prabhu after you.
yeah,
Different speech to make.
it's different speech. We know where you live, you know. We know where you
And he
live.
lives in Brooklyn.
So, ways to mitigate conflict of interest, okay?
That's my slide.
This is yours. Go ahead. I'll take one you take.
Okay.
I'll take the first one. Removal. What does removal mean?
You just change the name of a position.
You remove the... change everybody's name in the temple and... I didn't do it. It was the other guy. That's a good one. No, removal means you remove the conflict. There's a conflict and you just remove it. You don't... Example?
You give up running the restaurant.
You give up running the restaurant, for
Or you
instance.
give up being the temple president.
Yeah.
Well, an example of removal would be, I'm not going to get paid from the restaurant, it's my wife who's going to get paid from the restaurant.
That
But that actually is sometimes a valid way to do that. But all these things must be done with
integrity.
no
Oh, disclosure.
disclosure. In other words, if it's explained to the higher authorities, this exists, and that's sort of what the proposal is sort of is going to say, and we're going to get to that in a minute. Okay.
Yeah, so disclosure is a key element in this. That first of all, obviously, we don't disclose anything right now because we don't have any rules about it, and we don't have so much training in it. But for example, someone may sit on a temple board, okay, and the temple, that temple board decides this, decides that, decides this, decides that. And if they're making a decision about something that you're in charge of, you may want to, well, actually, this is the next one, reclusal. But in general, disclosure, it shows that you're being honest enough to recognize it and saying that, yes, this is a potential conflict of interest. I don't think it's necessary for me to remove myself from this situation, but I do think it's required that I let the key people know about it. And as in third-party evaluation, they can decide if I can continue in this decision-making process, in this role, or whatever. Is that a good way to put it?
For instance, disclosure is also used. Now we use in our financial statements for our leaders, GBC, they have to present financial statements. So in the same way that they're presenting financial statements, they will have to, with this new proposal, present any possible or potential conflicts of interest that might exist. That is one step to mitigating its effect. That it's disclosed, it's explained. I have this. Okay, so that's all right. Or they may go to removal. They may say, "Oh, let's remove it."
Right.
This is a problem. Some organizations, even the hint, a little hint of a conflict of interest, and it's removed.
Right.
Some institutions.
An example is in America, in the federal government, if you're a supervisor and you start dating a person who reports to you, right? You have to immediately disclose that to your supervisor. And then that supervisor will often remove one of the two parties, either move you to, or more likely the person that you're dating, they would remove him or her to a different department.
Or they may get married.
Or they might get married. But even that.
Yeah, even then it's not acceptable.
Yeah, it's not
Yeah.
acceptable.
Okay.
Can I ask a question?
That is a question. You want another one?
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, you can have three.
One more. Suppose there's a situation where the temple president, is developing a plot of land to construct an apartment building for sale to, let's say, potential buyers. But at the same time, nearby he has a piece of land which he also develops, in his own personal capacity, and then so he realizes that I'm going to make a lot of money by doing this. So he steps down as a temple president. He makes his project, he completes it, and then after he sells off all his apartments, he comes back and then becomes a temple president once again. So how does it work?
That means he knows all about this process of. He took the course.
It may be legitimate if he wasn't the final decision maker, right? If other people had decided, and but also if he had disclosed
He could have disclosed it, yeah.
then maybe other people involved or the GBC might have said, well, it's true, you're going to make a bundle. They might even negotiate something where you would donate, a certain portion to the deity service. They could work out a way with the authorities to continue. So it's not that this is a cut and dry process, and that's why there's 5 different things here. There's 5 different ways, and it can be negotiated. And again, you could even see in ISKCON, you could contact ISKCON Resolve possibly to negotiate that kind of settlement.
Would it have been the same situation if the land was ISKCON's land? In this situation?
The land on which he's going to be developing for the temple is ISKCON.
Is ISKCON land?
The other one is his personal land. So
No, there's 2 lands.
Both are going to make money.
No, but if this other land was ISKCON land, then it would be different.
He would develop the ISKCON land, the profits would go to ISKCON.
Yes.
And his private land, his profits would
Yeah,
go in his pocket.
I'm saying.
But if he remained president, there would be a conflict of interest.
No, I'm saying if the other land was also ISKCON's land, and he was going to build on it.
That could be
You see?
fraud,
No, yeah, that's.
No, some people, that could be.
He's not theorizing that.
Yeah.
He's asking the question.
No, I understand, I
If
understand.
He's developing one land for ISKCON and developing another land for himself, so he understands that it's a conflict of interest, so he's stepping aside. So now what do you call that?
That's called, I'll tell you one thing, that's called, and it's also conflict of interest, it's called insider trading. In other words, with knowledge of that this is going to happen, he builds something here. That's called insider trading. Yeah, that's also
Is that what you
conflict.
meant? He was building his own business property to utilize the proximity of ISKCON to benefit?
Yes.
Oh,
That's insider trading, but it's not.
Insider trading, I don't know if you're familiar with that term, most
It's
people.
not exactly insider.
But, yeah.
you know what's going to happen
It's
before they
similar.
announce it? You know what's going to happen before they announce
It could be
it?
said.
The Federal Reserve Board, for instance, in the United States, the Federal Reserve, it's illegal for them to own stock.
Right.
Because they manipulate the markets.
Because in India, a very typical situation arises that a person wants to give a donation of a land, a piece of land. He has a whole chunk of land, and then he comes to ISKCON and says, I'll give you 1 acre. He's got 10 acres. I'll give you 1 acre. Because he knows that if ISKCON is going to construct a temple over there, his land automatically appreciates, maybe twice or thrice.
Yeah, but Prabhu, he's not in ISKCON.
So it's not a conflict of
That
interest.
man who's donating, like this actually situation is going on in one town in India, I won't mention the name. Or at least it
Tell us
was.
the letter begins, no, I'm joking.
No. The president of the temple came to the RGB, we showed the whole thing, and he said that
Stand up.
the builder, a group of builders is offering us a land in the middle of their project because they wanted to increase the prestige of the project. You see, but they're not ISKCON devotees.
Now, if they were, it would be.
But since they're not.
Since they're not, it's not, but I mean.
It's just you could either say wise
Okay.
business.
You're running the seminar.
No,
I'm just,
we're on the.
no, I'm just giving an example.
It's a very good example.
But the way
Could you call
Right, the example of stock trading, what he's talking about, the problem is, like I was having a stock in a particular company, and if I traded, they would know. So there was a period I needed to disclose before I could sell it. I mean, that's how it worked for many years.
For insider trading.
So,
Okay.
so the problem is there's a governance. There was a FTC or some people are watching. I mean, who's doing it here? Let's say in our case, GBC and TP, they both mix together and do something what Prabhuji is talking about. Who's looking after?
He's asking, do you have a watchdog? Does ISKCON
Yeah,
have a
that's what.
watchdog?
Do we have anything to govern this process?
A financial watchdog. That's what he's asking.
Financial or any moral or ethics, whatever. Do we have any?
We have Krishna Dam Prabhu.
Yes,
He's the financial. He's asking the question, but he's like one of ISKCON's biggest financial watchdogs.
Well, let's talk about recuse a little bit. You want to talk about recusal? Okay.
It's very derogatory in India, the word dog.
White cat?
Prabhupada used it.
No, it's an English expression.
Let's go on, please.
Go ahead.
So in ISKCON we make certain decisions. As you know, most of our even judicial decisions are, what is it, authority-based? 95%. Is that correct? Of our decisions are
management-based.
Management-based. The authority of the management structure makes a decision. Now, it may be that he has the devotee who he has to make a decision about is a friend of his brother, or the friend, or whatever. He is personally involved. So at that point, what's the best thing for him to do?
Yeah, many years ago, in the early 1990s.
Stand up because it's hard.
Yeah, in the early 1990s, we had a seminar in San Diego, and it was a professional fundraising seminar with Cliff Underwood from the Underwood Group. And basically, and Peter Burwash was also there. And they basically informed us that the policy of a manager has to be equal to everybody. If you say no to somebody on a certain issue, and you don't have a big relationship with them, you have to say no to the person you have the relationship with also. And if you say yes to somebody who you don't really know very well, then it's normal to say yes to the person you have the relationship. But equality is very, very important in management.
And I would say that in a practical level, this is probably the most common potential conflict of interest in ISKCON. How many times have you said, oh, he made that decision because
Yeah, right.
they were old Sangaton buddies, or it's his wife's best friend, or, right? I mean, haven't we all heard that? Oh, yeah, of course he made that because of, So this is probably one of the trickiest
What
ones.
do they call it when you become a leadership position, and then before you know it, it's like 18 Akshohinis back, 200 years of your family members are all in the same project.
It happens when you win the lottery,
What
right?
is that
All of a
called?
sudden.
No, what is that called? Nepotism?
Yes, nepotism. So, what do? You recuse yourself. Recuse, a weird name. You abstain from making a decision. And you give it to someone else. Either a higher authority, I cannot make this decision. Judges do this a lot. Mediators, when they find that there's some personal involvement, they say, I'm sorry, I can't, which is a very honest way to deal with it. Sometimes, people don't recuse themselves, and it causes problems. Now, there is a process within the judicial systems that you request someone to recuse himself because you see that there's some sort of conflict, and he may have not disclosed it. Okay, so.
Like, let's say Nanda Sutta Prabhu and Rambhadra Prabhu are not getting along with each other, and they ask me to mediate. So this is a standard practice for me. I would go to both of them, and I would say, well, especially to Nanda Sutta, I'd say, I've known you a couple of years. I've known Rambhadra since 1987, and I lived in the New York temples for some time, and I know them quite well. But I will still do my best, and I think I can act neutrally, but I want you to know that ahead of time. And are you still willing to have me as your mediator? So
what is he doing? What is he doing in this process?
He's trying to be fair.
He's disclosing that there might be a possible potential conflict of interest.
You know, because ISKCON, we all kind of know each other, I have to do that all
He
the
will
time.
recuse himself if you ask him to.
If you would have said, no, I'd rather get someone who doesn't like Ram Bunder, I don't know if that person
There's
is.
plenty of those.
No, I don't think that person exists in this world, but you know, if they did.
Haribol, Maharaj is standing, I think you should invite him in.
Maharaj,
He likes. Do you want a chair?
Yeah, I'm in the seminar.
okay.
Part of the reason for that proper etiquette and that particular ethical behavior isn't it because that once a person enters into the decision-making process, either as a mediator, a judge, or whatever, if that wasn't disclosed, or if he did not voluntarily recuse or challenged an attempt to recuse him, then later on appeal, the whole thing could be overturned.
Oh, yeah.
They could say, oh, the guy who was...
Yeah.
Oh, no, the Sutta might say, yeah, of course, he's known Ram Bunder since 1987.
So you wasted
Yeah.
time and money.
Yeah, of course.
But
Of
it
course.
only works if you have no.
One second. Wait. Varshana, what did you?
Just an example that we
You want to stand up also, we can hear you?
an example we recently had in the UK with regards to the legal situation, where somebody in the jury was found to have gone on the internet and Googled
Right, right.
some information from the case and was found out, so ended up in prison as a
Really?
consequence
Yeah,
because
yeah.
it was unethical and
Sure.
immediately created a situation. But
Right.
I'm not sure if that's a conflict of interest or if it's a conflict of ethics.
I would say it's a governance most likely by government.
Prabhu.
Still, thank you for that.
Are we supposed to assume that people already have conflict of interest, or should we wait for them to disclose it themselves? Because we don't have any culture of identifying it so far in ISKCON. So
It's a culture we have to develop, yes. Yeah.
That's the idea.
See, a lot of the thing is perception, because many devotees, for example, as managers, even if Ram Bunder is my best friend, I can still make a nice, clear managerial decision and say, Ram, no offense, but I decided this way that you may not like so much, and then have prasadam with him later. We can do that, but still the perception might be there. And if you take the conflict resolution course, you see that perception is reality to people, even if it's not objective reality, and so much, and leaders, because this is a leader's Sanga, right? Leaders have to be beyond reproach, like with Lord Ramachandra, Lord Ramachandra, they need to take that extra step. And when you do, I have not yet, I've done, a lot of mediations in my ISKCON career. And I, every single time, I'd say 90% of the time, I know at least one of the parties. And I have yet to have somebody say, no, I don't want you as a mediator. Because they just appreciated the disclosure. So even if there's a potential conflict of interest, I think most of the time in ISKCON, if the leader just discloses it, most of the time, their authority would just say, no, go, thank you very much for informing me, I'm really happy you did that. No, please go ahead and make the decision. So just that act of disclosure is such a kind of sign of integrity.
It's not the end. It still has to be monitored.
Yeah.
To keep the person, an honest person.
Keep honest people honest, yes. Yes, Varshan.
The question that you just made is if you disclose it to your authorities, it doesn't generally necessarily mean that it becomes a situation acceptable for those.
Right. Right.
Because quite often you find a situation where you've got a community of devotees completely freaked out about something, and then their leaders say, well, I let my authorities know. But it doesn't seem to make it an acceptable thing for those people.
Of course, they have the right to appeal it to a higher authority.